Welcome. This is BloombergQuint. I'm in conversation with Anil Gupta, the chairman and managing director at Havells India, which has posted earnings. Mr. Gupta, thanks for joining us. Let me start by asking you about your assessment of the quarter gone by. Was it the last couple of weeks of lockdown that have bear down on it? Because from what of reports we've read, January and February were very strong for you all. How has the quarter been, and where do you go from here?
Yeah, I think, as you rightly said, after a little bit of a tepid demand for the first 3 quarters, January, February started well for most of the consumer products. We didn't see much traction coming up in the industrial category, but mostly in the consumer products, we saw some good traction. Lawyers started doing very well. But yes, of course, the last couple of weeks, lockdowns definitely impacted major sales also in all product categories, but also in the seasonal product categories like fans and air conditioners. So yes, definitely it has impacted the last quarter. But I think it's the way we look at it is it's an unprecedented thing, and really can't say much about it, and the organization has to get ready for the future.
So a word on the ongoing quarter. Has production completely nil for the month of April? Because from what I understand, the production has begun gradually from the first week of May. From here on, towards the end of this particular quarter, what do you expect in terms of production for Havells?
So what we've started seeing is after the lockdown has started opening up in certain parts of the country, we've started seeing some activity. We definitely want to see how it pans out because, there's no point in producing at full capacity unless their sales start at full capacity. So we started seeing some action in orange and green zones, and that's heartening to see, in fact. And that on basis of that, we've started some levels of production activity in a couple of our plants. And going forward, how it pans out, I think we'll continue to take decisions on a day-to-day basis.
Okay. So once the lockdown is completely being lifted, and that I'm assuming will happen over the next couple of months by conservative estimates, do you expect the consumer sentiment to pick up first, or would it be some of your segments which are a little more industrial facing?
I expect that the consumer products will see better traction initially. But going by the fact that how Prime Minister Modi announced some major initiatives by the government in the coming times, so I think latter part of the quarter or year, we'll see more activity even in the industrial and government side. But initially, definitely, it has to be front-loaded by the consumer sentiment.
Sir, I understand this is the early days to put in any sort of projections, but around when do you expect normalcy to resume? Would it be fair to assume to a certain extent the final quarter of this financial year?
So your guess is as good as mine in this thing. I think definitely we would expect normalcy much before, but this is all, again, something which we are all predicting based on... I think what's most important is the flexibility in an organization which is required. How, if things start coming up earlier, how we can immediately cater to those demands. If things get delayed, how we keep the company strong during this type period. So that's the major focus right now. I think there's no point... and possibly another point to look at is what kind of future trends that we may be looking at in the coming times, rather than actually estimating how much demand would be.
All right. So a final question is on your operating margins, and we understand that they've remained largely flattish because you guys have carried out a lot of your costs which have been curtailed. So as in how production ramps up, we also seeing costs move up. But do you think that at least in the near term, in the next couple of quarters, that will be in line with the ramp up in sales, or do you think that in the near term your costs could be slightly higher as you see a slight ramp up in production?
Well, I guess the best way to learn is through a crisis, and during these crises in the last 40 days, we've closely looked at our organization, and I feel the good costs will come back, the bad costs have to be curtailed. So in any organization, when things are going well, certain bad costs also come in, and I think the organization will be looking at each and every aspect of those, and hopefully we'll not be able to restrict them from coming back. So there will be a lot of cost focus in the coming time, and which should definitely help the margins in the coming times.
Fair enough, Mr. Gupta. We'll leave it at that. Thank you so much for joining us and talking to us here. Thank you.